So today, our class is about getting an offer accepted. So now things are changing in the market. We had a lot of competition that we were dealing with before. Now we're going to be looking at changes in values with higher interest rates, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate the market now with getting an offer accepted, and as a listing agent, what to look for in offers that you start to see. Even ones that we call non-QM mortgages or non-qualified mortgages. So we're going to go through all those details and break it down. Some things you may know, some things you may not, and we're just going to talk about it a little bit more as we go along. So let's go on to the next slide. The basics of all loans: credit, income, and assets. And then we talk about the complete application because that's the story. So understanding what a person's job history is, understanding living situations, all of that comes in the application. Also the history of the client. And then also that comes with credit. You have to have an application for credit. And then we get to analyze the income and assets to kind of figure out what's the affordability of the buyer and what can they actually buy. Next one. What you would expect to receive from a buyer today is a pre-approval letter. Most people are just going to give you the basics. The basics is that pre-approval letter. The client will provide you with assets. The lender is going to go through a couple of extra steps to get them qualified. That's going to be reviewing the credit report and understanding whether or not that credit will satisfy the loan program in which they're looking for. And then the other thing is AUS findings. Those are the automated underwriting system findings. Now, automated underwriting system findings are not only used for standard loans like a conventional FHA financing type of loans. AUS findings are also used for jumbo financing. They're also used for non-qualified mortgage financing because sometimes they just give the basics about what's happening in the market. So those basics are not in the market, in the client's file. So those basics are the foundation of what they're going to build the qualification and approvals on. So we'll go to the next one. So what is credit? Okay, let's start with the basic stuff. Credit is a review of the way you as a buyer borrow money and pay it back. Do you pay it back on time? Do you have missed payments? Do you have collections? All those things affect your credit score by using an algorithm to come up with a credit score. There are 3 bureaus that will report on your credit: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Those are the 3 bureaus. Most places will need at least one of those bureaus to report a credit score. Okay? Doesn't matter. Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, any of those 3 to at least report one score. Sometimes a score may not show up on another bureau because of the fact that maybe the creditor or that debt is only reporting to one bureau. They're only reporting to Equifax. Maybe it costs too much money to report to all 3, so they just report to one. So that also causes the varying scores that people receive depending upon the bureau that is reporting it. So that's why Experian is different than TransUnion, because of the way that the debt is being reported on that credit. A good credit score is somewhere that's going to be about 620 and above. Financing can be achieved at 500 for a credit score. It can. But there are a lot of milestones and hills that you have to climb in order to be qualified. I know it seems impossible because most of the time we're looking at 580 and above, because 580 is traditional financing. FHA does 580 and above. The truth is though that VA and FHA will go down to 500. It just depends on the investor. What investor is going to take that loan and what are the requirements that they're going to have, and is that going to be reasonable for you as a client, a buyer, to be able to purchase a house based on those requirements. Okay? So this is what you would see normally in a range of credit, and like I said, 620 and above is really where you want to shoot for. Anything that's higher opens up more opportunities. Things like down payment assistance programs that range here at the 680 and above. Some go down to 660. There are some that do 620, but you have more options available to you the better your credit score is. Okay? Next. Things that are on the credit report that don't show up necessarily in the numbers are going to be things such as like mortgage rates. Okay? It may not necessarily affect your report poorly where it's going to move you out of the range of qualifications for mortgage rates, but if you have too many mortgage rates in a situation, that'll cause you to not be qualified, okay? Because if you have 3 mortgage rates in the last 12 months, you won't be able to qualify for traditional financing. You'll have to do with an alternative program, like a non-qualified mortgage program. Lates on accounts will affect your credit score. Minimal account history or lack of established credit will also affect you. Things that are on up here are like also that come up on credit reports are your judgments, your liens, child support, things like that that you owe can also show up on your credit report as well. That's why it's an important factor to make sure that we get credit reports, because even though there may not be a score, there's sometimes history that's associated with that that we can use for qualifications. Next. How much money is enough, right? So we're skipping over income at this point and moving into assets. Nowadays, if you're buying a property with FHA, you can buy a property up to a loan amount of is 947, 41, don't quote me on that. But it's somewhere in the mid 900s that you can actually have a loan, FHA. So you can buy a property at about a 975 with about 3.5% down. Yeah, so almost $1 million property FHA with 3.5% down. Okay, that is possible in LA and Orange County areas. Okay, that means that the loan amounts have gone up significantly enough that it allows for less out of pocket, less down payment in order to be able to qualify and purchase. Conventional financing, same thing. You can go up to 940,000 with 5% as your down payment. So the requirement for assets has reduced significantly in comparison to the last couple of years because they see the values of properties going up, and it's hard to qualify with 20% down when buying a property. So the need for less money out of pocket is going to be a requirement. So if you're buying a property at 970, right, and you need to put down 5%, you need to also accommodate for closing costs of 2.5%. Okay, 2.5% of the purchase price. So let's just even up the numbers. Let's say you're buying $1 million property, you're putting 5% down and then 2.5% for the purchase price. That's $50,000 for the down payment, and the closing costs at 2.5% are going to be $25,000. So you're looking at $75,000 in total that you have to buy with on $1 million property. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, if you think about it, you're financing so much of the property's value that, you know, banks are really kind of sticking themselves out there. And you'll notice that on those higher loan amounts, those higher balances, the interest rates do go up significantly in comparison. So in order to know the interest rates, make sure you talk with your loan officer. 3.5%, sorry, back up 1 second. So 3.5% for the down payment. If you think about that same situation where you were paying $75,000 for conventional financing, you're going to be paying somewhere at about $60,000 for FHA. So a lot less down for a single family house, primary residence, in order to be able to buy. And this is primary residence based. In other words, if you are living in that property, you are afforded these opportunities to be able to buy that way. If you are buying a duplex property, one with units, and you are living in it, then FHA scenarios are going to probably be more advantageous for you because it'll still allow for 3.5% down on an FHA property up to $1.2 million. So $1.2 million. So you're able to buy and finance up to $1.2 million on that property on the duplex scenario. Okay, rental income, you still have to qualify it. Your income has to be sufficient to be able to qualify, and you have to have enough in assets, and you may be required to have reserves depending upon your credit score. Sometimes 2 months, sometimes 3 months. So you can't just empty out your accounts. They want to make sure that you're a strong buyer who has enough saved up in order to be able to qualify for something like this. So keep that in mind. But the beauty of this is that even though the cost of living and the cost of buying a property has gone up, there are options available to help you at least get financing for it. Now, monthly payment, remember, monthly payment in these situations with putting this little down requires property taxes and insurance to be included with your payment. You can't separate that out and pay it separately. So, and then anything under 20% down is going to require mortgage insurance. So that's another factor that is a part of that. And that's going to affect your qualifications as far as debt to income ratios. What you make is going to be analyzed by the loan officer and entered into a system combined with your application, combined with your credit, combined with your assets to determine your qualifications and approvals. Next page. So in your assets, if you're looking at this from a listing agent's perspective, right, you're listing a property, right, or you're submitting to this listing agent, you want to show that you have enough assets to cover the scenario. In this market, the thing that we've seen in the last couple of years is that prices have continued to increase. We'll start to see a change in that this year, but with the price increases, if you have a property that you're listing, right, you're selling your property, and you are looking at all these buyers and you're trying to vet them, and you know that a buyer is going to try to be as competitive as possible, and the way that they're going to be competitive is they're going to challenge a higher purchase price. They want to come in higher than the person next to them, right? But you have to make sure they have enough money to cover the gap should there be an appraisal issue. An appraisal is a market evaluation of the property in comparison to other properties that have sold in the area of like type. So if the value of your property that you're selling compared to the market is, let's say you're selling it at $800,000 and the value comes in at $790, and you know, because you have a really great real estate agent that's telling you that your property is valued at $790, but you get somebody who's emotional that's going to bid up to $800, you got to make sure that they have enough money to cover that difference, because their financing is going to be limited to the $790 in this case and scenario. So let me recap. If your financing puts you up to $790, doesn't mean that, let's say you qualify as a buyer to $850, but the property you're buying only goes up to $790. The bank will only finance up to what amount the property is marketed and worth, based on the market value. If you choose to spend more than that, doesn't matter if you're qualified for more, the bank will only finance up to the amount of market value for the property. So you got to make sure that the client that is submitting this offer, this buyer, has enough money to cover the gap. So when you're looking at offers as a listing agent, as a homeowner, and you're looking at people's offers, you want to make sure they got enough money available in order to cover that difference should the appraisal come in lower. That means then the negotiation can begin at that point, and you can discuss where that value is if you want to continue to maintain it at that 800, or if you're going to reduce your property value, your purchase price down to the market value. So it's a difference between market value and purchase price, okay? And just making sure that the client or the offer that's being accepted has enough cash or money available somewhere to cover the difference should it become a problem. Okay. Next. AUS, Automated Underwriting System Approval. Okay. In a traditional mortgage, conventional, FHA, VA loans, USDA loans, we put this through an automated underwriting system approval to determine whether or not a client qualifies for the amount of purchase price and loan amount that has been put into the system. This automated underwriting approval gives a list of requirements for the file. There are two different types that we work with. There's 3 different investors. Most will work with these 2 different types. That is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, known as desktop underwriting or DU, or loan prospector LP. So these 2 are the systems that you enter in your mortgage into to determine the qualifications and whether or not you will qualify for this loan scenario. Okay? This is what the underwriter will go through in order to figure out the required requests of documents. It lists out exactly what you should be requesting from the buyer in order to complete the file for them to complete their approvals. Most often, these approvals are generated at the beginning of the application process and in the pre-approval, because we want to know, based on their credit history, their reserves, everything that they have, that they will qualify based on the ratios that are determined by the purchase price and the down payment. So the income that the loan officer generates, if it is conservative, if it is, if they're stretching the components, it's in the income that they'll be stretching, because everything else is assets. It's just your listing assets, credit, it's already pulled in, job history, all of that stuff is part of the application. So as long as the application is completed correctly, the assets are put in correctly, and the credit is acceptable, you'll get an approval. The only thing that's really missing in this component that's determined by the loan officer in reading the qualifications is income. And when this goes into underwriting, that's the only thing really that's getting approved for the client, really, at this point. They're just double checking everything else that comes off from when we originally started the application. All right, if you can go to the next one. So in this next slide, funds that are required, debt to income ratios, all of that is put into the system to determine qualifications, and is therefore, when you go into an escrow, really, if it matches, nothing's changed in the client's criteria, all that's really qualifying is the house at this point. It's not even the buyer. It's really to make sure that there's no other issues on title, that the house can be transacted to the client, that it matches up to market value, that it's in good condition so that you can close escrow. So if all the work is done up front with the client for income and assets, then, and credit, then escrow should be a breeze, okay? So it's just making sure that all of that matches with those ratios. So you can ask your loan officer and say, hey, what are their debt to income ratios like? How are they working here? Now remember, the client has to give you permission in order to receive this information, okay? As their real estate agent or client, you have to ask for this information from your loan officer. The Graham, I always mess this one, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act does not allow us to share this information because it is personal and private information to the client that was used in order to generate their qualifications. So we can't share this information, but if the client approves it and says, yes, this is my real estate agent, then you can have a conversation about it with the client, and the client can share that with their agent, okay? So this is part of the qualification package, and I apologize, that's why sometimes we are under a gag order when we're loan officers, because of the fact that we have to be sensitive to a client's personal information and qualifications. So there are some banks that will not even talk about any of this with you because it's a violation of the privacy laws that we have. Next. Now we're going to talk about non-qualified mortgage. So we've talked about FHA, we've talked about conventional, we talked about the assets required in order to buy, the income that's necessary, and what they're going through for an approval process. What a non-qualified mortgage is a mortgage that sits outside of the normal system, okay? This is a place where clients get qualified for things such as bank statement loans that are non-traditional forms of financing. Okay, so these are going to fall outside the norm, and we're going to talk a little bit about them because I want you to understand these non-QM mortgages or non-qualified mortgages, the kind of things that you should be looking for when it comes to this. Okay, if you're a buyer, if you are a real estate agent, how to understand these loans and the way they affect a buyer's qualifications, and what's actually going on with these programs. Okay, so step one. Credit. Each program operates differently depending upon the credit requirements of that program. There are some programs that are geared specifically to lower credit to provide a loan to someone who is struggling with their credit situation, like we talked about, down to the 500. So even though sometimes FHA and VA may allow credit scores all the way down to 500, a private investor will have to step in order to want to take on the mortgage to be able to finance it. And they may have stronger requirements for that. So this kind of falls sometimes under that FHA VA scenario because there's some allowed situations, but it has to be investor based. That investor will determine the qualifications or requirements because of that. Assets, okay? Assets will be determined based off of the program themselves. Foreign national loans require as much as 30% to put down. Bank statement loan can get away with that minimum 10% down. But the 10% down may have some other restrictions like debt to income ratios. So a bank statement loan may require a 43% debt to income ratio or less in order to qualify with 10% down, okay? And I'll go over which all of these ones are as we go through it. So 10, 20, 30% down options will depend upon the program. So it's hard because I'm telling you it depends upon the program because it depends upon the investor, which is why I go to the next part. You either need to get a commitment letter or a pre-approval letter, okay, for sure. And have a conversation with the loan officer to understand how well do they know the program that they are working with, okay. It is important because the pre-approval letter will determine the program, the amount of down payment, and you're going to have questions. Have you reviewed the income? What are the program details? And if you can grab the program details from, that's general knowledge. So you can request the program details so that you can see if there's anything that may show up for your client if you're a real estate agent or for yourself as a buyer that might stand out and cause a problem for your qualifications as you go into an escrow. So program details are important to make sure that you're fitting those guidelines and important to closing an escrow at that point. Next question. Next slide, sorry. So let's go over some of these programs, okay? So I'm just going to go over some of the basic ones that are out there and then kind of give you some general idea of what each program is. So first one, bank statement loans. It's 12 or 24 months that they analyze business bank statements for a client. The reason why this bank statement loan is popular is because of the fact that as self-employed borrowers, you may not necessarily want to show all of the income that you generate because you have a lot of write-offs. Maybe your business performs in a lot of cash deposits, but Uncle Sam is knocking at your door for their taxes, and you don't necessarily want to show all of the income that you generate there, in essence, for the qualifications. If that's the case, then a bank statement loan might make sense because then they'll take a 50% expense ratio or less in order to qualify you based on your deposits over the last 12 to 24 months of bank statements. The next program, a DSCR. Forgive me, I always forget what DSCR stands for, but it's a rental income-based program. It basically takes the rental income that the property can generate and compares it to the mortgage that would be paid on the property, and if they're equal at 100%, then that's all that's necessary to qualify. You don't even have to provide tax returns. This typically happens for homes where you have a borrower that's putting down more money, than the normal, so that it lowers the mortgage payment down enough so it equals or is less than the rental income generated by the property. And you'll need rental agreements to show that, to prove it. This is also very popular with those that are refinancing and they maybe they're retired and they don't show the income like they used to. They want to, extend out the mortgage for 30 years, 40 years, and they want to just lower it down so that they can gain more profit. Then the DSCR might make sense because their loan amount is less. It might make sense to refinance it to stretch it out, and that'll work there. Okay. So that's based off of rental income alone. You don't have to use personal assets to qualify. In there is also an asset depletion. If you have a lot of assets, you can also use an asset depletion program to show residual income that would help determine qualifications for a purchase as well. Those are those for bigger assets also. ITIN, this is a non-citizen loan, but a person who has a taxpayer ID, okay? These are complicated because most investors require a visa or a passport from the country of origin. There are very few that are out there that do not have that requirement. And you can actually get away with purchasing as an ITIN with job history and all of that. So these will require sometimes 30% down, up to 30% down depending on the requirements. If you have a passport or visa from your country of origin and you have an ITIN, you can get away with as little as 10% down. Foreign national loan, that's someone who doesn't have a taxpayer ID here, who's coming from another country, looking to buy, and their requirement is up to 30% down on a purchase of a property. They do not have to have a Social Security here. They can buy with this loan and foreign national loans, but you also have to make sure that you get income documents from their country of origin. How do they have income? How is it reported? Typically that's based off of asset depletion. So it's usually someone who has a lot of assets, and so the asset depletion loan is used in combination with the foreign national. 40-year term loans. They're coming back. 40-year terms. The interest rates are high on the 40-year term loans, so they're not as beneficial as the 30-year terms, but the 40-year terms are making a comeback, and they do have 40-year terms with a 10-year interest-only portion, and then you pay the other 30 years amortized. So interest-only and adjustable rate mortgages are going to be making a big push back. The 10-year interest-only options on the 40-year loans help a person with the lower monthly payment to start, and then you expect after the 10 years you're going to be paying principal afterwards. This is meant for someone who is looking to get into a property. Maybe they have commission-based income, or they're self-employed where they have bigger seasons versus others, and so their income doesn't move in a straight line. So sometimes the 40-year interest-only loan makes a lot of sense because they can apply money to the principal when they have it available, but they need a lower payment for those first 10 years, and then we'll see where the market goes. They may refinance later. So it's something that requires a lot of strategy and in looking into to determine whether or not this makes sense for you as a buyer. Interest-only and adjustable rate mortgages, those kind of got a nasty taste in their mouth from other people in 2008, if you've looked at the market long enough. 2008, there was a lot of people who got into interest-only loans, and when the market adjusted, it was hurting them. And that's something to keep in mind, that because these adjustable rate mortgages and interest-only options are going to be coming back. Because people need lower payments, right? You're buying a house that's expensive, you need an affordable payment, but if you're not careful and you get into something where you're only paying interest only, it can be very, very comfortable to adapt your lifestyle to interest only payments, that when they adjust and go to higher cost when the principal is applied, it becomes impossible to maintain those payments, and that's what has caused problems in 2008 and beyond. So it's something that's out there, but just be careful. And then the last one is, which is huge, and if you've known the market since 2008, the stated income loans. So stated income is coming back, where you don't have to present any financial documents. It's no income, no assets. You basically, you state everything. You state what you do for work, and you get approved for a loan. So as long as you got good credit and you have a pulse, then they'll take you on that loan. But the interest rate's a lot higher. But yes, stated income is making a comeback. So there's someone that's out there that's offering that now. So that's it for us today. That's our types of mortgage programs. Julio Sandoval, Art Pacheco's there behind the camera. And any questions? Pat, you got a question? Later? Anybody on Instagram Live? Okay. All right, awesome. Well, if you have any questions now or in the future, please give us a call. You have our contact information here. We're going to be posting this video up on YouTube so that it can be shared with others. So if you have clients or know someone who's interested in buying and they have questions regarding programs like this, please give us a call. Be happy to help. Thanks, guys.